Hey there, hello everyone.
Hi everybody.
How you doing?
Hello.
How you doing? Greetings. Welcome. We're back once again.
Yes, we are back.
It is, it's like we come on every week and we're like smiling. We're like, oh, it's all good. And we have been running like rats in a cage or something like that.
Since early this morning.
Yeah,
this week, yeah.
But definitely this morning.
Yes.
So we're here.
From morning until now.
But
and it's not over yet.
It ain't over till it's over. So good evening, everybody.
Good evening.
Welcome. Waiting for a few people to come online and join us. Once again, it is time for conversations. And we're glad to be with us. Pam David Stewart,
yes.
Of course, from here in Rochester, New York, at Destiny Preparation Church. And happy to be able to share with you one more time and just get a conversation going as to what's happening in and around us right now. And we know there's always a lot. Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, very serious things. And, we like to have the opportunity to bring a perspective to that, to give people an opportunity to discuss it, think about it, kind of process some of the things that are going on. And there certainly have been quite a few things going on, even here locally in Rochester, and I think that relates a lot to what's happening throughout the world as well.
Yes.
So, so we among other things, we unfortunately were at a funeral this week. We had to facilitate a funeral for someone locally, and a family that has a lot of has had a lot of death. Over the past year or so, some of it, just related to a lot of different things. So we're praying for that local family, that the Lord will be with them. Also heard just a little while ago to all of our friends in Africa, one of the people that we've been working with closely, Pastor Bernard Nganga, his father suddenly passed away. Yes. And so we're praying for him as well, and of course for all of those that are over in Kenya and other parts of Africa as well. Hope that you are having a good day and a good week. And, as always, we're continuing on doing the things we've got to do. And as we all do, right?
Yes.
We make it happen, right?
We make it happen.
Keep it running.
Yes.
Keep it rolling. And hopefully everything, we can be successful with things that we're doing. So tonight, got a few things to talk about, and we'll see what you guys think about it. Still looking for, I see a couple of viewers starting to show up now. Good evening to you. Good evening. Coming on a little slow tonight. Must be football games or something.
Or something like that.
What y'all got going on tonight? It's Saturday night. Come on, let's talk this out. But several things have been going on right now, and we have been thinking about a few of them. Thought we might want to talk about a few of them this morning. Good evening, Emmeline. Glad to see you on. Talking about them a little bit to kind of get an idea of where some of these things are going. One of them is something that came up from several years ago. Yes. Excuse me, I don't know how much people have heard about this because this was kind of soft in the news. Yes. But you may remember a situation in Flint where they had some very impure water, heavy lead concentrations.
Heavy lead, yes.
And it was
very bad.
People were complaining about it literally for years.
For years, yes.
Saying something ain't right with the water here.
There's something in the water.
Yeah. And it was ignored for a long time. And finally, the truth came out, and they discovered the fact that the water was contaminated with lead. They had switched over. Flint had been using Detroit water for a long time, and they wanted to save money. And it was an older system. Right. So they went and started trying to use the Flint River water instead of Detroit's water. So, and when they went through their system, the pipes and things like that were not well managed. Exactly. And so as a result of that, they started getting lead in the water. It started affecting, the children and things like that. Yes, they started getting poisoning. People's skin wasn't healing right. They're having skin rashes and what have you, and it actually caused some of the children retardation. Yeah, I was wondering if we know if there were any, how long that had been going on. I know this all came up, the legal aspect of it came up in 2014. Yes. So it's been 7 years, right? But I don't know how long that had happened, but I know it had been protested for a long, long time
Yes.
about, the drinking water. There's got to be something wrong with it. You saw a picture
Well,
that we posted earlier where you could see the water,
yes,
right?
it
And you could see that it was like
it
nasty.
was nasty. It was brown, and this is what people were drinking. They were cooking with it. They were bathing with it, and it caused a lot of health problems to the people in that area.
Yeah, I want to find that image real quick because the water itself, you could tell, was really nasty looking.
Yes.
And they had been drinking this water for an extended period of time. Oh, I don't know if I can do this quickly or not, but the better way. Let me do it. Try and do another way because I want to show you this image for those who didn't see it of the water. So let me get this real quick while we're talking. But this, I mean, there were some issues that had been going on for a while. People had been talking about it. They had been concerned about it. They had been complaining about it for a while. Okay, here's something I can show.
Yes.
So you can see the difference in this water. I'm laughing, but it's seriously
it's a
serious.
serious situation.
This is the Detroit water on the right. This is the Flint water on the left, taken out of the pipes. That is really nasty. In terms of what was going on there, big problem. Now that may or may not have been somehow exaggerated, but the bottom line is testing did show that the water that was coming out
was
from
contaminated.
The source was badly contaminated.
Yes.
Badly contaminated, and it was a serious problem. And I think this is part of why people were actually complaining because I think they were drawing water out of their faucets and seeing this nasty colored
Exactly,
water.
and they were complaining about
Right.
it. They were complaining about it. The big issue is that the area was a very low-income, impoverished area.
Right.
And most of the people could not afford to leave. They couldn't afford to move because it's cost money to moving expenses. So they were actually living there, giving their children, babies, this water.
They were bathing in it. They were drinking it. They were making food in it.
Yes.
All the above. So they were in a bad situation, and nobody was helping do anything about it. So this all finally came out again back in about 2014. It basically everything came to the forefront, and they had all this stuff going on. Well, now 7 years later, they finally have a settlement. In this case, $626 million in the settlement. So that $626 million that gets put back into the system to be used in some form or fashion to rectify. Now, when you talk about rectifying, there's some permanent damage out of this. So some of the stuff will not be rectified. Some of it is some form of restitution. Some of it may go
medical bills.
Right. This is not the money to fix the problem. That was their responsibility.
Exactly. This has actually affected the lives of people.
So it's going to provide, this to tens of thousands of Flint residents. Right. $626 million is going to tens of thousands of Michigan residents, Flint, Michigan residents, for the years that were impacted by exposure to the lead and water drinking. And so, that's still, you're dividing that up out of tens of thousands of people. So
right.
by the time you divide this by, 10,000, it may be 60,000 a person or something like that, 6,000 a person. When you think about all the exposure that these people had, the detriment that they were put in,
right.
That's nothing. Not to mention any personal damage or anything they had responsibility towards in their own house repairs and clean-outs and all this stuff.
There's long-term physical damage.
Right. So you have health issues, health conditions
right.
that have to be treated, all kind of things like this that come up from a result of this that go on. And again, you think they've been waiting 7 years for this to be resolved. So for 7 years, these people have had to deal with it on their own, right?
Yes.
Whatever things they've had to deal with. They're looking for proof of an injury as a result of the lead exposure. Children exposed to lead, and those who paid their water bills. They get reimbursed for their water bills.
Yeah, really.
But it's what they went through, the experience, the exposure that they had, the long-term impacts, because lead has serious impacts
Oh, yes.
on the body.
Yes, it
You know,
does.
but-
And yes, it also affects people mentally.
Right. It affects
Yes.
your mental capacity.
Mental capacity, retardation.
Exactly. All
Yes.
those kind of things can cause physical issues as well, especially young children.
Yes.
You know, you have to be very careful. You know, even now, we still talking about lead in paint
Right.
in homes.
Exactly.
And the danger of that. We've seen a few different cases over the years of children that were exposed and were eating paint chips.
Exactly.
And that lead content had major effects and killed some. in fact.
Exactly, and that's why they made a law, and they made it mandatory that lead be removed from homes.
Exactly.
Yes.
So, you know, there's another case, and I don't remember the details of it, but I think a similar situation just showed up more recently in Michigan elsewhere. I think. I could be wrong. If somebody remembers, you can drop a note. But I think there was another case in Michigan that just came up, I'd say within the past year or two, that is like this, but did not get nearly as big a play as this case did. So these things are still very problematic. And again, it's really ironic that they only seem to show up in areas where people don't have money.
Exactly.
You know, in poor areas,
impoverished
poor neighborhoods,
areas.
poor communities.
Exactly.
That's where you see these kind of. You don't find these kind of problems where the zip code has a lot of money.
Exactly.
They just don't show up. They don't happen like
Yes, and you know the sad thing too is that how it affected the children, because lead, the children begin to have behavioral issues.
Right.
Attention deficit disorder, all sorts of issues. So that's actually interfering with their learning ability
that. Yeah.
and with their education.
The other problem with that is that you get into these areas of gray zone. Did this really happen because of lead poisoning? I mean, this is where lawyers get into this, right? Can you prove that's a result of this, right? So somebody is born with a defect, and the question becomes, yeah, but is that really related to this water situation, or would that have happened anywhere? So you get a lot of these gray lines, gray zones.
What happens with that? That's where an epidemiologist would come in,
Yeah.
and they would study the number of people that have been affected by or that have these symptoms.
Right.
And then they would trace it to the water.
Yeah, but I'm talking about one-offs, though. I mean, because
Well, if you just have one, well, then you can't really blame that on anything other than genetics. If you only have one or two, but if you have a number of people that are having the same symptoms,
Right.
it's something like there's been other diseases
Yeah.
where an
they do cancer.
epidemiologist,
They do cancer,
right,
cancer,
and they study
right,
the number of people
yep,
in the area.
right,
And so they were able to trace it back to what the root cause
right.
may have been.
And what I'm saying is that's okay for the broader population, right? But there are going to be those that aren't necessarily. They're not going to be having the same symptoms exactly that the rest of the population is having. It doesn't mean that it didn't come from this, though. And a lot of times, it'll be hard to tell. So, for example, there may be a good core of people. All of a sudden, like you said, the OCD rates or the certain rates go up, and so
Yes.
you treat them all now as they may be reflective of this. But somebody else is born and they have, let's say, a hearing problem,
Yes.
right? Which may or may not have been affected by this, and because there's no cluster, right? They can't prove it. So now this person is fighting because they said, I had this child. This has never happened in my family. They came out with this kind of defect, et cetera, so forth. We think it's because of this, and they're gonna look at it and be like, maybe, maybe not. What do you want with us, right?
Well, that could possibly happen, but I think that the Flint water issue was so publicized, and that so many people became ill, adults and children, that you can almost probably
Make a correlation, or cause, maybe
Right.
not a correlation.
but it could be cause and effect.
But inherently, you have the point being that you have a group that, as a result of this, all were exposed, are going to have increased problems.
Yes.
Some of them maybe that more than likely would not have shown up if they had not been in this exposure.
Right.
I suppose that's why this settlement is so broad and generic, because it's going very much across. They will more likely be much more open because they know there was a defect issue happening in that area, right? So, but at least there is a settlement. That's great. It's kind of horrific that it's taken so long. I can only imagine what it is to live through that. First, the years of exposure, and then the years of being exposed to all the costs without anything coming back for it. So
Right.
It's a good step in the right direction. It's just it's amazing how long these things can take
Exactly.
to work themselves out. So another issue we wanted to talk about tonight has to do with first of all, right here in Rochester, there has been a tremendous number of homicides here in the city of Rochester over the past year. In fact, a record-breaking number of homicides here over the past year. We'll talk about what that means, across the country. But somebody wants me to buy a suit. Let's see if we can get rid of that. But right here in Rochester, the record had been like either 69 or 70. I saw 70, but I thought somebody had said 69 homicides in 1 year here in Rochester. And that's for records dating back into the 30s, right? That's when they first started taking records. This year, as of this week, we had 69, 70, and 71 all within 24 hours of the year. 69th, 70th, 71st homicide in the city of Rochester of the year. We still have, 7 weeks or so left?
Right.
And this thing has been going on. They're describing it now as being almost like a war zone. Because, think about how many times you go around town now and you see areas taped off.
Right.
You see buildings taped off.
Yes.
Because every other day, there's a shooting that's going on.
Right. Or you see memorials where they put little flowers and teddy
and
bears
and
candles and drinks and what have you.
Yeah.
You're seeing a lot of that, and you're like,
not to mention the memorials in the at the grave sites. It's just
right.
They're all over the place this year. It's just skyrocketed up, and this is really only the number that were killed. The number of shootings, is an even higher number. And what's even more significant out of this is out of the 71 people that were killed, 60 of them, 60 out of the 71 were teenagers under the age of 18. Under the age of 18, 60 out of the 71, that's like 85% of the homicides in a record year that have happened in this city have been teenagers. And if you were to go beyond that and say, okay, how many, you go 18 and 25, you can imagine that number, the vast majority of them, even beyond that, these are young people that are being shot, being killed in various ways, but largely being shot on the streets and their homes, et cetera, so forth. One of the guys that got shot this week, they found him out in Webster. He was in the city, got shot in the city, disappeared. He wasn't there, but they found him at his home. Somebody traced him back, found out who it was, and traced him to his home, shot, injured in his home in Webster. These things are like happening all the time. And there's a huge question surrounding what is going on, what is causing, this eruption. I've been here for a number of years now. I've been here, 30 years, something like that. And I've seen these times where we have these summers where, it goes a little crazy. And up to maybe a few years ago, had it started slowing down, calming down. There was a lot of claiming that, we're getting this under control. The rates were coming down significantly. I remember them being closer to like in the 50s. And then the past, say, 2 years during this pandemic, it has just skyrocketed.
It
again.
has. And, it's Rochester, yes, but it's all over.
Right.
It's really in our, in the cities.
Definitely in the major cities.
Yes.
We've talked about Chicago quite a bit. And there's several other major cities which are also fighting this. I believe Philadelphia is one of them.
Yes, Chicago has been terrible. Their rates have been very high for a number of years.
Right, for a long time.
Yes.
Specific parts of the city in particular. And the behavior here is, you ask yourself, are these connected in some kind of way? I'm talking city to city. Are there things that are going back and forth that causes one city to impact the other? Or is it just a more generic behavior based on situations that are happening across the board, and it just is swelling up
That's what
in
I
the
think.
cities?
Yes.
So because you're seeing this behavior, it's mimicking itself around. But is it connected to each area, or is it just the same kind of environment that's drawing it out? Because we're seeing more and more of this in many of our
Major
major
cities.
metropolitan areas.
Yes.
And so you look at what's happened over the past couple years. Of course, we've had this pandemic. Kids in particular have been home. They have not been going to any kind of organized schools. And we could talk about that as well, because the schools, now that they're back in the schools, the violence in the schools,
Yes.
again here in
exactly.
Rochester.
I pretty much predicted that the schools would the
kids would be
children
unsettled.
They would be very unsettled, and that they would have to become acclimated again to being in school, and that it would be a lot of pressure on educators.
So there's a whole sense of violence, right? Striking out, being physical in the school, striking teachers, striking each other. Teachers now are getting quite nervous about being in the schools.
Yes,
with these
because the
kids.
children are being very violent, and I don't just mean high school students. I mean elementary, middle school students.
Wow.
They are, they're very aggressive in some
Aggressive,
situations.
yeah.
Yes.
And so that aggression ties itself back to what we're talking about now. It's just showing up throughout. It's showing up in the school systems. It's showing out in homes. It's showing out on the streets. And as part of this, you start getting this payback thing going, right? You killed somebody in my side, I want to kill somebody in your side, and it goes back and forth. But this growing rage and aggression that's going on amongst young people, you really have to ask yourself the question of where this is coming from. What is drawing that? What's deriving that? Is it something that's happening? Is it because of what's happening in the families? Is it because of frustrations, not having opportunities? Because it's not even, you get to the certain age, high school and beyond high school, where I can understand frustrations, because if you haven't graduated, you're trying to find a job, you're trying to take care of a family, you're trying to work, do something, and so you're in more of a desperation situation there. But these are the kids that haven't gotten to that.
Well, I think there's a lot of unrest right now. There's civil unrest. If you think about when COVID occurred, then you start thinking about Trump. Then we can think about the insurgents. Then we can think about the polarization between the Democrats and the Republicans, and the racial issues that we've been dealing with. So it has been an aggressive climate right now, and I just think it's an overall spirit of aggression that has also affected our children. It's what's going on in society right now.
Let's come back to that point. But before we go to that, I want to talk about, you talk about all these different influences around us,
right?
The things that are happening, divisions. You would think that within the inner city, it would unite us versus having us going after each other. With Black Lives Matters and things like that, you have a common enemy. This is the enemy, right? We need to deal with that enemy. But what's happening is we're going against each other. Right? People who should be united on a united front are now turning on each other.
Well, if you think about the population, we're saying that it's the younger kids that are turning on one another and shooting and killing one another. Also, there was a rise in firearms in the homes due to the civil unrest.
Right.
People were frightened. People were unsure of, what could happen.
Right.
So there were more firearms in the home. So there's more availability to the children to get a hold of the firearms. And, we're living in a society right now where children are influenced very heavily by these negative things.
And
they're influenced by the drugs. They're influenced by the music. They're influenced by their peers.
The video games.
The video games as well.
We were looking at video
Oh,
games today.
we're looking at them today. They are quite violent, and they're actually arming themselves,
Right.
and they're fighting this figure going across the screen, and they're shooting them.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's almost like you are mentally the kids are being influenced by guns and violence.
Well, you look at the escalation, right, and like I said, the escalation of violence, because it used to be this was like you'd be talking about after school fight, right? I remember when I was coming up, it was after they're gonna be a fight after school, right?
Yeah.
So you're gonna go and throw a few blows, and people are gonna watch.
That's
and
it.
You get up and move on, right?
Right.
Now it's like escalated from I'm gonna punch you to I'm gonna shoot you. And not only am I gonna shoot you, I'm gonna kill you.
I'm gonna exactly. Right? It's like a fight is not a fight anymore. You don't even want to have an altercation with no argument. Because you could end up dead.
It's a whole nother level.
It is.
In terms of what's going on, in terms of the violence that's happening. So here in Rochester, at least,
my brother was saying it's violent and very graphic.
Yeah. And so here in Rochester, at least, they're declaring a state of emergency. Okay, against the violence. They want.
So weren't they like bringing in the feds or something?
They did that already.
They brought them in.
There's a federal support group that's here now. They're adding in additional officers, federal officers, as well as from other areas. They're building up the forces. They were saying that there's at least 30 people at large that they believe are tied to this, and they haven't had the resources to go and actually get them.
Right. Well, isn't it true that they believe that it could be some type of a drug war? Or
I don't know.
Or something like that.
That's what I wonder.
This is something that I have been I've heard.
See, because
I haven't researched it much.
Because that's a different thing that happens, in a lot of times in the inner cities where you have these kind of turf wars. They go back to
right.
The different gangs against each other. This seems even a little bit past that. But the question is this really turf war type activity? Or is it just, I don't like you, or you did something to me, or is it an overarching response?
Could be all
you
of
just you got mud on my shoes, and so I'm going to shoot you, right? I mean, is it an acceleration of the type of response, or is it organized, like you said, your side against my side? From what I've seen and what I've heard when we've been around young people in the city, I haven't gotten that it's like, quote unquote, your side of the street versus my side of the street. I haven't gotten that. It seems to be such a broad variety of kids that are in and mixed in and around this. Because when you used to have like gang things, it was kind of like you're in this gang, you're in that gang, but that's only a small percentage of everybody. What's happening right now, it seems to be affecting such a large, broader group of young people.
And
they're all impacted.
And it's very serious.
Right. And it's all like, a friend of my friend and so-and-so and da-da-da. And it's not like these are necessarily the kids that are out there trying to do the violence, but they're all impacted. Because they all know somebody that's been shot. And some of this we know seems very random. Somebody was walking somewhere, a bystander, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
They were in the wrong place. They got shot in their house through the walls.
And their children are affected. The child gets killed.
Right.
Because the child is in the car.
Yeah. So some of it typically is kind of turf-related activity, but this just seems to be getting so much
anger.
Broader.
Yes.
And it's it's just rage, just flashing out, and I don't care who I kill, or I'm trying to kill somebody, I'm willing to shoot. We've seen that a few years ago where these guys went right into a group of people, came driving by and shooting, trying to get certain people, and were just shooting anybody in the way.
Well, too, I hear the word a lot, amongst the young people, respect. They all want this respect.
Right.
How dare you respect me? You disrespected me.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So now we've got beef. It's
so that's what
ridiculous.
I'm asking is this just a higher aggressive response?
Yes, I get what you're saying.
Instead of me, trying to punch you out or get my friends to hurt you, I'm just straight up going to shoot you. right? I don't know. I don't know the answers to these things, but these are some of the things that are out there. Now, you mentioned earlier spirit, and we should talk about that because speaking from a spiritual perspective,
Yes.
right? This is some of what we would tie this to, is that there is a transition that's been happening, and it's not. This is only one symptom of a lot of things that are going on in our
Right.
society right now. The transitions that we're seeing in our society, especially amongst our young people,
Right.
are very broad. If you look at what's happened over just the past, let's say, 5 years, the changes that have been going on in terms of identity, in terms of struggles in their homes, in terms of family relationships, all of these things have caused a massive transition amongst our young people.
Right.
The sense or need in many cases to if you will grow up earlier or try and be in adult situations much earlier in life, to the approach of these type of mature adult decisions that are now being handled as children.
Right.
There's a huge transition
is a lot.
emotionally, first of all, that's happening.
Exactly. Well, yeah, children right now, some children have a lot of responsibility. Some children don't have as much supervision.
And they have a childhood.
They don't have a childhood. Exactly.
And so it certainly, the environment is in itself is shifting. The emotional states are shifting. They are being required again to handle a lot of what used to be adult-minded decisions earlier.
Exactly.
Now we're getting into things again, like when you get in, we say it many times, something like marijuana being now legal, not to children, but of course legal above a certain age. Realistically, the exposure is greater, the use is greater at a younger age. So you have all these things messing with your mind.
Right.
I mean, just think about it. You have all this stuff messing with your mind, your mental state, your emotional state, all these things. And it does lay out an atmosphere for spiritual attack as well.
Yes.
Because if you believe in the spiritual aspects of things, this is like a hunting ground
It really
for
is.
spiritual attacks. And they don't have to look. It's like a modern day spirit. They don't have to look like somebody, demon possessed and frothing out at the mouth and things like that. There's such an opportunity for influence.
Yes.
Amongst children, that from any direction you want to put it, from the spiritual perspective, from the impact of spirits operating through other people, especially adults in and around them, it sets up this atmosphere.
Yes.
For all kinds of negative influence into hearts, into mind, into the emotional state, right? And then keep in mind also going back further, the past, say, 10 years, we've had such a failing graduation rate coming out of high school.
Yes, that has been happening for a long time.
That the adults that you're looking at now that are supposedly leading these children,
right,
are this generation that's coming forth that have not graduated, that don't have skills, that are looking, that are looking for all kind of other ways to survive, or haven't really been taught how to successfully survive or align themselves with community. And so all this now is the adult population in their 20s plus, right? That are leading and rearing up these children. It is a messed up situation in terms of the influences that it has on these kids. Your brother says the youth have access to information that they are not mature enough to process.
That's right.
Information, visibility of, they live in it, they see it, they watch it. People are telling them all kind of stuff.
Right.
They're getting all kind of influences from all kind of directions, including now peers.
Right. Exactly.
Which is the thing they listen to the most.
Right.
And so their peers are saying, this is okay, and that's okay, and this is what we got to do, and this is how we survive, and this is how we act. And they follow that. And if they don't have, we used to say it takes a village when it comes to raising children.
Right.
And you'd have that village of mature people, which would help set direction, which would help keep people guided in the right, young people guided in the right direction. And that was a primary influence, your village, right? Not only your mom and dad, First, you had your mom and dad,
Right.
but not only your mom and dad. Then
You
you
had
had uncles and aunts, and you had
Yes.
church members,
Exactly.
and you had
People next
in
door,
the neighborhood,
down the street.
right? And
Yes.
and this village helped to keep children in the right tune, the right track.
Yes.
And even though there were other influences, it was kind of like they were guarded. Right?
Exactly.
You got everybody guarding these kids.
Exactly.
Now that has so thinned out.
It has.
And now you have your influence, your primary influence coming from televisions, from social media, and from your peers. That is your primary.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
And so when your parents are at work, you are sitting home on social media, on some game,
Right.
something like that. That is feeding you. That's telling you what reality is.
Exactly. You know, a lot of parents use social media, they use the iPads, they
babysitters.
use the computers as babysitters. Because it keeps them occupied.
Right.
But they're being
While they're doing whatever they're
occupied
gonna do.
with the wrong things.
But the social structure has truly broken down, and so kids are in this place where, again, they're very vulnerable, they're very exposed, and they have all kind of things coming at them, driving in directions.
Right.
And the thing that I see, I'm not trying to be negative, but when I look at parents today that we are involved in raising their children, time and time again, they go through this kind of opening this opportunity of influence around their kids. And then when they get to a certain age, they're like, what's going on? Why is my kid acting out like this? Why do
Right.
I see this? Where did this come from? Right? It's on them before they realize it. And now they're like, man, I need to do something about this, and it happens constantly. And it may show up in middle school. A lot of times that's where you start seeing it.
Yes.
It may go all the way up to you don't really see it until they get out of or at high school or coming out of high school. But they're looking at their kids and it's after the fact, saying, "Wow, where did this come from? Why is my kid acting this way? How did this happen?" It's because we haven't kept them protected, and they have been influenced
Right.
in those younger years.
Exactly. The exposure.
Right. And now, you're paying the piper for it, because that's why we tell people, and we're trying to help people, parents especially, say, look, you have to raise your kids early.
Exactly.
You have to raise them from the time they come out, and you have to imprint as much of what is right as you
Positive
can.
things.
Right.
Yes.
And you have to demonstrate it.
Exactly.
Because you can't just tell them or try and get them to act a certain way, and then you're acting an entirely different way.
You have to protect and govern your household.
Yes, you're imprinting.
Exactly.
imprinting on
That's how
them.
you imprint.
Right.
Yes.
If there's war going on in your house, right?
Exactly.
It's imprinting
Exactly.
on those kids.
Exactly. If there's
you're-
weed and alcohol
if you're-
in the home
Right. It's
while they're
imprinting.
growing up, that's imprinting.
Right.
And they feel like that is okay to do.
And if you tell them to do one thing and you're doing another, guess what they're following? What
the
you
wrong
do,
thing.
now what you say.
Exactly.
Right? If you don't have a village, the other thing that's happened, we've become so scattered. So people are living in places they don't even know who their neighbors are. Not to mention family. They live in an entirely different
Right,
place.
right.
So they're raising their kids in isolation, and they don't have that backup, because children, just like adults, right? We go through the same thing with adults in different ways. They look for reinforcement of things, right? I go through all the time at work, and have for years, where if something is going on, people don't necessarily are concerned about it. They'll ask me about it, and then as soon as they ask me about, okay, thank you very much, they walk away and they go and they ask another boss the same question, right? Because people want that sense of confirmation. It's in our nature. Children do the same thing,
Right.
And so if you're speaking to them, mom and dad, and that's fine at first, but they get to a certain point, and now they're hearing something different from their friends, right? Unless you have something reinforcing what you're saying to them, guess what? You're outnumbered.
Right. Exactly.
Right? And as they grow older, they start listening less to you and more to the other influences around them.
Right.
And so they get drawn to that. And so you have to really keep an army, if you will, of support, the
around
right
your
kind of
children.
atmosphere
Exactly.
around your kids. It's a rough time. It's a tough time. And this is what we're going through. So, your brother's pointing out that these are things are tied to what we see in Scripture from a spiritual perspective. These are things that said it's going to happen. And it's amazing to me to see the transitions and how these things have crept up. I've been preaching about these kind of things for at least 15 years. right? About be careful. There's a strategic attack on children. It's coming. They're going to try and influence them, blah, blah, blah. And we've watched this happen over these past 10 years or so, more and more, deeper than I could have ever imagined.
That it would have gotten.
But it just
in
continues.
this lifetime, right?
It just continues to go on. So we want to keep going. A couple other things I want to bring up just because for some time's sake. There's been a couple of court cases we started about last week, and we just want to update to where they are because they've been going on this week, and everybody's been watching them. One of them is this story of Kyle Rittenhouse, which has been an interesting story to watch. And for those who may or may not be familiar with it, he was involved with an incident as 17 years old where he was in, I forget where it was now. They were at
Kenosha.
Thank you, Kenosha. And, there had been protests going on there. And so him and others were called to come help keep the peace, even though they have nothing to do with keeping the peace other than the fact they had a gun. Right? So they show up there and they're supposedly helping to keep the peace. He ends up shooting 3 people. 2 of them die. The third one survives, right? And it's called self-defense.
Yeah, right.
And so the case has been going on all week. The interesting thing is it's looking like he might get off and acquitted from this. With what has been, you've been watching the cases more than I have, but it sounds like, based on what the arguments that have been brought, both by the prosecutor and by the defense, it's sounding, and the preponderance of legal experts are implying that, this looks like he may actually be set free from this. So
if set free, maybe a much lesser charge, or set free. He will not be held to the highest penalty of the law.
So here's the issue with this, okay? There's a possibility that they could be offered the opportunity to find him guilty of lesser crimes.
Right.
But it's up to the judge. And it depends on what the judge decides, because the judge may not allow them to offer those lesser penalties, in which case he would be found not guilty of, I think it's 6 different things he's right now on trial for. If he's found not guilty of those, they could come back and try him again based on lesser charges, right? And they'll have to decide what they're going to do on that. But from this turn, I don't know the specific things that he's accused of. I know there are different levels of murder, right? And what's been brought to the court is that, some of the people that he ended up shooting were already aggressive prior to that.
Right.
He was on the stand, which is what this picture shows us. And, people felt like he did pretty good. Again, legal experts looked at this and said, they felt he did pretty good. Now, this is one of the famous scenes. This is one of those debatable ones. I don't want to make the whole thing about it, but he went into hyperventilating and semi-crying, and as part of his testimony, they paused that. But there was a lot of debate. Is this real? Is he faking it? What's that look on your face?
I'm
You have a look on your face. I've seen that look before.
You've seen that look before.
Was he crying? Was it real? Was it fake? Was it hyperventilating? I don't know. Personally, I don't know the answer to that.
I don't know. I don't see any tears.
But if it's hyperventilation,
was he
hyperventilating?
hyperventilating? They said he was hyperventilating.
It could have been like a panic attack.
It could have been. I would panic if I thought I was going to jail.
Yeah, I panic too.
Maybe,
But there's others that have said that he actually had taken acting classes.
Exactly.
and that
it was a grand performance. I'm just saying that's what they're saying. I'm not saying it, but somebody said it.
Somebody said that dude needed an Oscar. That's what somebody said.
A lot of people are saying that. Yes.
I don't know. Whether it's real or not. But this is one of the few times that I've seen somebody comes up in their own defense, and people across the board felt like it actually helped instead of hurt. You don't see that very often. First of all, you don't see a defendant, especially for murder, come up on the stand, right? There's a lot of risk associated with doing that. And second of all, seldomly does it really work out when people say, well, that really helped. I listened to some of what he said and listened to all of it. I would say that they had well prepared him, because how he answered certain questions was very, very well
Very
done.
well.
I have
Very,
to say that.
very rehearsed.
Right. There were certain
Yes.
things, questions that came to him, and his answer to it was just very well defined. To
Right.
not assume his own personal guilt in what he said, but to respond to the question in terms of what he did. And so I think that's a lot of what the lawyers have seen, and they've said, forget about the crying scene. His presentation presented why, from his perspective, he was responding in self-defense.
Yes.
Right? And laid out that argument. And
The
so
whole time.
Right. And so now the question is going to be how it's going to, now they've come to rest. And I think Monday they come and do their final the final statements from on both sides. But
Well, a lot of people have complained about the judge as well.
A lot of discussion about this judge.
Yes, they feel that he has been very biased.
Kind of a cranky old
from the
dude.
very beginning, very rude, very nasty. So there have been complaints about him.
Yep.
And also the jury. The jury is supposed to be a jury of peers.
Right.
And
right,
and
right.
it doesn't appear to be that.
I think this is the jury that has only one
black person.
Right. And this is also the one where one of the jurors was dismissed because he had made a joke about the actual man that got killed by a police officer, which started the whole riot. So he made a joke about him, and so they dismissed him. So
the judge is making racial jokes
about Asians,
about Asian food, and so people are not very happy with this judge.
Yeah.
And I believe that the prosecutors are actually may possibly say mistrial if he is to get off because of this judge.
I think both sides will. The defense has been had tried to request for a mistrial as well,
right?
With prejudice, meaning that it could not be tried again if it was dismissed. So both sides, that's what they do. They're going to throw out what they need to do.
Right.
If he's found innocent of this, he's acquitted because it's a murder trial. He could not be tried of that again unless it was somehow overthrown.
Right.
But they could come back, I would believe, and go for lesser charges. And so we'll see where this all pans out. More likely this will finish out this week, and we'll see what happens with it. The other case now that's going on is seemingly going in a little bit of the opposite direction. The case surrounding Ahmaud Arbery.
Yes.
This particular case now, 3 men again are accused of trapping him, cornering him, and killing him in a quote-unquote effort of calling themselves trying to make a citizen's arrest. And in this particular case, it looks like this case is going very much against all three of them.
Yeah, it does.
And, there were the father and the son, that were directly involved. And then the third one, almost said Holy Spirit, but there was a third man that was in a car. And he started this whole thing saying, hey, I was just there videotaping it. But as we found out, he was actually in his car, part of the pursuit, pulled in front of him, actually perhaps bumped him or blocked him at a minimum, bumped him at a maximum with the car to keep him from escaping. And so they've got unlawful imprisonment in there for that, along with murder here, because in the midst of all this, Ahmaud died.
And use of a weapon. The car is now considered to be a weapon.
Right. And this, again, has been one where this one has been harder for them to be able to say that, no, we had justification.
Right.
In Kyle's case, they're making the case that he had a reasonable mindset to feel like he needed to shoot to defend himself.
Right. And here's another argument with Kyle's case is that the person that is that he killed, he's not here to say why he was pursuing or being aggressive towards Kyle, because they're saying that Kyle was shooting at people.
Yeah.
So this guy was like, "Hey, you're shooting people."
Right.
And he ended up getting killed too.
Yeah.
So he's not here to say that.
That's definitely one of perspective, and you have one of the three that's still alive, and the one obviously is making his point, but unfortunately the one that's still alive also had a gun.
Right.
And apparently they were pointing it at each other.
Right.
And so that, again, that case is a little bit more ambiguous.
Right.
In terms of, it's a matter of whose perspective you're going to believe.
Exactly.
And keep in mind, for that case, what the defense needs to prove is that Kyle, from his perspective, had a rational reason to feel like
Threatened.
he needed to shoot in order to protect himself. I don't know whether I personally buy that, especially when you have people who are unarmed. I think I think you might swing at me, so I'm gonna have to shoot you, right?
Yeah, right.
It's kind of excessive of a response.
It is. And, actually, he really shouldn't have been there, and he should not have had that firearm, in the first place. Because he wasn't of age.
He shouldn't have been there. It wasn't his firearm. He was underage.
Right.
And so he shouldn't have been there. He was supposed to be there to help work like a medic, even though he wasn't that either.
Right.
So he was just a kid that got himself in the wrong place, wasn't prepared for it.
Saw the opportunity.
Appropriately.
Yes,
So,
to be there.
Bad deal.
With a gun.
But, when you look at Ahmaud Arbery, again,
Yes.
in this particular case, it looks like, again, one of the statements that came out is one of the sheriffs or one of the police officers made the statement that they had not deputized these guys.
Exactly.
Right?
They had not.
Hey, they weren't working on our behalf. It goes back to this law that they had at the time about citizens arrest.
Right.
And under what kind of conditions and terms. So the lawyers or the judge is going to have to go back and look at that and determine whether what they did fits and aligns with that law or not. But, they're like, so you got two things. We're trying to make a citizen's arrest because we think that he may have done something wrong. So
that's another.
Well, first you got to get into
think he did something wrong.
Whether this should have happened at all.
Exactly.
Right? Whether there was really a just cause for them to be trying to apprehend him anyway. That's number one. And then number two, okay, we're trying to make a citizen's arrest on him. How does that escalate to shooting him?
Right.
And are they responsible for the fact that their initiation of this and having a gun with them caused an escalation? Now they're trying to say, look, we were trying to do what we're supposed to do, and then it ended up this guy attacked us, so we felt for our lives, so I had to shoot him. That's what they're trying to say, right? Look, you got a kid here where
unarmed,
3 white men are coming at him.
3 white men
from
with
different
guns.
directions, and they're chasing him through the neighborhood, and they're cornering him.
Yes.
Right, and they come out with a gun. If you think somebody's going to just put their hands up, I mean, this isn't a police officer. They're not declaring they're a police officer. They're not shouting police.
Right.
Right? These are 3 guys that come running out of nowhere at you with guns.
Right.
Right? And cars and a gun. And he's thinking, I'm assuming, that his life is in danger.
And it was.
Right?
Well, obviously.
So I would be asking the question, did they ever even say, look, we're trying to make a citizen's arrest? Does he even announce that that's what their intention is? We saw you in the other house. We want to hold you until the police comes, right? That's a citizen's arrest. Not, hey, stop, boy, and pull out a gun at him.
Have you heard
that's
the
like
language?
You trying to kill me.
The
right?
language that they were using. Did you get that, Joker?
So it's there. That case, I think, is a lot harder pressed for them to defend their actions and not say that they were excessive.
Right.
Now,
and it's due to the parents that there is a trial going on right now. It's due to the parents that they are arrested because they were not.
Right. And the other thing you see here is Al Sharpton in this particular picture. And there was some conversation this week about Al Sharpton.
And Jesse Jackson.
Right. And they were out in front of the courthouse. They have been obviously out there leading the chants with people that have been there in and around, and that for justice, and justice needs to be done. And they happened to sit in the courtroom. I think Jesse Jackson on one day, Al Sharpton on another day. The defense lawyer saw him out there, and the fear that they supposedly have is that they're being there because of what they represent in this social justice crowd and influence could have a negative impact on the jury from them if they wanted to say not guilty, because they see him out there and think that that is a crowd, right?
That it may incite.
Then they might be afraid that people are going to come for them if they choose not guilty. So it influences them to go ahead and say guilty, because they're out there in front of the courthouse saying, "We need justice. We need justice to stand up," and blah 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 blah. They're making all this and getting people riled up. If I'm sitting in the jury box and those people aren't saying anything, but they show up in the courthouse and they're looking at you dead in the eye, is that going to influence me to say, if I say not guilty here, I might have a mob coming after me when I leave here?
Well, that shouldn't.
Well, it shouldn't. That's real. I mean, shoot, I'm serious. If I'm in that box,
yes,
do you start thinking of that? Yeah, I would maybe start thinking about that.
Yeah.
These people, their names have been kept. private. They have shown the intention of keeping their names private, and a lot of them after this is over, people will tend to come out and show themselves. But if they want anonymity in this, which I wouldn't blame them for, especially if it's an all white group, right? If they say not guilty, this is like reverse, right? It used to be, if they said guilty, then the other mob would come after them. Now they gotta be afraid if I say not guilty, or if I say guilty, that or if I say not guilty, that this active mob could come find, because they're sitting there and they can see their faces. It's not like they're in the jury box and nobody can see them. They say, oh yeah, I know that. You know that guy? Yeah, they all live around. They're peers, right?
Yes.
You know where they live, right? Okay, so if something happens. So I could see the argument. Now the argument as it was made by the defense lawyer was very poorly made.
It was
very poorly made.
You know what? I've been listening to the language, the words that have been used in this case.
Come on.
And they are so racist. I don't even think they realize how racist they sound.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But we have to remember, this is Georgia.
Right. So so very poorly. But at the same time, I can understand the argument. So if you wanted to make that argument, that look, people who are outside riling up the crowd for justice should not be sitting in the courthouse because this needs to be a neutral place. I could understand that argument.
Yeah.
The way that they did it was Southern Georgia. It was not well done. And so anyway,
well, they did the same thing with Maxine Waters when she said that we'll have to be more aggressive.
Right. They tried to use that
as well
as a public statement out there and almost a threat.
Exactly.
And the same thing as concept is here. These people are out there outside. They're not saying it, but it's on the edge, a fringe of a threat of what happens if he is found, if these guys are found not guilty. And to have that sitting in the courthouse, I would agree is probably inappropriate, because you need for the courthouse to be a neutral place.
Yeah. Okay.
Right. And even though they came in and didn't say anything, I can understand the argument.
Their presence.
Right. Their presence and what they're representing at that time speaks.
Right.
And so I think there's a legitimate argument there that has to be dealt with. So, one other comment here from Carl about, to stand your ground is not applied to Ahmaud Arbery case. That's correct.
That's right.
What they're arguing though is self-defense, not stand your ground. They're arguing the fact that when they were trying to take this man in, and they're saying they legitimately they're trying to prove, first of all, they had a legitimate reason to try and take him in, which they got to prove. I don't know if they can prove that. And then secondly, they're saying in trying to do their civic duty, right, that he became a threat to their lives.
Right.
And therefore it was self-defense. That's what they're trying to say.
Yeah, they're saying that they were protecting the neighborhood.
Well, but the reason they shot was because there was a struggle with the gun, and they're saying that struggle made it a threat now in my life, and so I had to shoot him to protect myself.
Where they should not have pulled the gun.
So this is a whole interesting chain of events, right?
Right.
When it'll be interesting to see how this gets pulled apart. Again, first of all, do they have any right to be trying to stop him like this in the first place? Do they have any rational reason according to the law? The law at that point said you can make a citizen's arrest, but there's got to be specific guidelines in the law that point to what would justify
a citizen's
you being
arrest.
able to do that.
Exactly.
So they got to get over that hurdle first. And once they get over that hurdle, then they have to deal with, okay, based on this, was there reasonable evidence that you had to shoot him because of self-defense, right? Or was the escalation on your side, his side, blah, blah, blah. Those are the things we're going to have to wean through and to decide on all this.
And if they felt that they needed to make a citizen's arrest, well, the owner of the home said that he never made any phone call and that there was nothing missing from his house.
Yeah, but they were looking through the neighborhood, and they were trying to find out, because I guess there had been some things, vandalism happening. And so now they have this wide net, and they're saying anybody that comes through the neighborhood that looks like they're doing anything unusual, we're going to stop them. And that was the mindset they were at.
That was the mind. That's what they're saying.
Right.
But from watching the case, there may have been a little
A little what?
A little bit of a robbery, but it wasn't that much.
Yeah, but
To have a real concern like, oh my goodness, we've got a robbery every night, we've got a robbery every week, we've got a robbery every month. It wasn't that at all.
well, this particular case in particular wasn't. There was no robbery going on there.
Right.
So they, like I said, they threw this wide net at. It's like instead of using fly swatter to kill a
Yes.
fly, you use a grenade launcher. Wide net for a problem that really was not nearly as wide of a problem.
And even if it was a citizen's arrest, this young man should not be dead.
Well, that's the bottom line.
He
That's
should
the end
not.
result of it. And the question
Right.
is, whose fault is it, right? And so that's what they're going to decide. I assume that case is probably going to end next week as well. So we'll be watching both of these very serious cases to see what happens. It has a lot to do with where the culture lies in these areas. And so we'll be watching to see where the jury ends out, but also watching to see the cases, right? This is a legal system. And sometimes the legal system works for or against, so even these are two cases that are somewhat on opposite ends in terms of where they're heading. So it'll be really interesting to see how these turn out and the logic behind the decisions that are made.
Okay.
So it is 9:03. We've been on for an hour with
Yes.
you. Good conversation on our end. Thanks for those who've been online. Hope you have enjoyed it. For those of you who watch this as well later, hope that you get something from this. Want to remind you that you can go to our YouTube page. And our YouTube page, you can subscribe there, and you'll get notices. If not available on a Saturday, that's no problem. You get
You can go
notices
back and watch.
when we post these. They're all up there. So go to the page. When you go to YouTube, just type in Conversations Pam David. And when you type that in, you'll find our page. Subscribe to that page on the red button, and you will have access to what comes down every week, no matter what's going on. You can catch it later. You can follow up. There's a lot of other previous conversations too. Some great previous conversations up there.
Yes.
So
yes,
we do
have
invite you to
had
go
some really
check
good
it out
ones.
and connect in with that, and let us know what you feel. Send us a comment, send us some feedback. We love to hear it. Also share it with somebody else. Share it with somebody so somebody else gets connected up with us as well. So tomorrow we're continuing our series that we've been talking about, Get Your Faith Back, and we've been talking about declaring and decreeing. Powerful subject. So for those of you that believe in your relationship with God, hey, this is a powerful, this is a subject of power.
Yes, it is.
So
It's
we
very
invite
good.
you to catch up with us tomorrow, 11:30. You can come directly into the church. We realize that there's still a pandemic going on, and we're still treating accordingly. But we are having live services at the church, or you can connect with us online. Also, Bible study taking place. That's been great going on now on Wednesdays. We're approaching the end of this particular series, so join us this Wednesday, and we're winding that. We only got about maybe 3 weeks left of this series, so catch up with us for that. All right, so I think enough said. Hope you've enjoyed yourself with us tonight, and we look forward to connecting up with you again next week. Make sure you stay close, stay safe, have some fun, and go to church tomorrow, and we'll look forward to connecting up with you again on the next time. All right, good? Anything else? All right, I think we're good. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye, everyone.
Have a good night. We'll
Be
see you
safe.
next time.
Be healthy.
All right, bye-bye.
Yeah. Here we go.
Whether it's in the courtroom